Walken from USA Today has a misery index. A&M was at the top of it. Here are some things he said about Baylor after the loss to Kansas State. There should be no hangover when you beat the worst Oklahoma team in the last 20 years, but there was for the Bears who followed the win in Norman with a belly flop at home against Kansas State. He went on. Baylor was never in the game at any point, dropping a disappointing 6-4 in the season. What it looked like on paper, it should have contended for another Big 12 title. In the big picture, it was perhaps a mistake for Coach Dave Aranda to put all of his chips on the quarterback and Blake Shapen. Just hasn't been good enough this year and threw 2 picks against the Wildcats. And then this one. But at the same time, why did Baylor have thousands of empty seats against the top 25 team when it needed an alum to buy thousands of tickets to sell out, which we found out was about 3,000? And this is a question, and I've seen some back and forth on this, and it's true, Serum. There are some fantastic fans, a bunch of great fans, and then there's some that kind of, like everybody, kind of up and down based on how the wind blows and maybe if you're good or not, and I get that. It's with a lot of people. But this is the one that is, I think, a great question. Are Baylor fans content with being an intermittent contender, or do they want to be a perennial Big 12 powerhouse? I think they want that. I think the athletic administration, I think the coaches, I think a lot of fans want it, but that's the misery index with Baylor.
So at their best, pre-Bryles, they were an intermittent contender. So the root of many Baylor fans.
Pre-Bryles?
Like before the pre-Bryles.
Okay.
Pre-Bryles.
Okay.
In the Grant Taff era. So a lot of the Baylor fans who are between, like, until about 1989, 90, that grew up in that era, were used to being an intermittent contender. So in their very DNA as fans, that's what they're used to. It doesn't change even with the success they've had in the last 15 years or 10 years or so. So I think part of the problem is that, and Baylor's not the only school who has this issue, but I do think when you look around the schools that go, look, Nebraska still goes to games. In spite
they had to have a donor or two, though, kind of keep that streak alive.
But for the most part, they still
right.
go to games in spite of.
They wouldn't need to if they were competing for Big 12, Big 10 championships.
But they still pretty much go because it's ingrained in their DNA growing up that what do you do on Saturday in September, October, November? Well, when the Huskers are at home, you go. That is not what has been ingrained in the DNA of these fans, and they need to start ingraining it now because they just have so many conditions on whether they'll go to a game or not, the time, the weather, the freaking shirts that everybody's going to wear, all that stuff. It just needs to be, it's Saturday, they're at home, you go. That's got to be the feeling in your soul as a fan. Otherwise, you're going to keep contending with all these issues.
They have a lot of those fans that's just a matter of how much do you have to dip into that pool. Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I could go a few different ways with this. Will, I guess, just start off by saying, like, attendance is an issue at some places across the country as well. But I'd be curious to know of how many of those have had the type of success that Baylor has had. Now, granted, I know that somebody will pop up and say, but we've also been through so much. But, like, I get it. You love carrying that cross. Like, you love to talk about how you carry that cross and how much you've been through and all that. I am sick of hearing about it. I don't care anymore. It's hard. To be a fan sometimes. I get that. It's expensive to be a fan. It's all those different types of things. So if I'm talking about somebody who can't afford to go, then I'm not talking about you. But I do think that there are enough people in the fan base where you don't have to buy 3,000 tickets for a top 25 opponent when there's a Big 12 championship spot on the line. I don't think that's crazy to think that. So if you're somebody that can't be there because you have a medical issue, clearly not talking about you. You can't afford it. Clearly not talking about you. But if you can, and you're deciding you're not going because, the AD was mean to me, or the assistant AD was mean on the radio, which was not even true, and that's all in your imagination, or whatever bogus excuse you want to make to then go and like pan something else that you don't like or you're upset about. I'm over all of that. I'm not going to try and sit here and rally the troops anymore. There's a lot of people that were taking victory laps for the turnout on Saturday, and I commend all the people that turned out on Saturday. It was great that there was a blackout. I didn't care about the blackout. Like, that was not ever in any way something that was designed for me anyways, but clearly a lot of people were into it. So, hey, it worked out well. That's great. But, to have that crowd show up and have the football team not perform well at all was massively disappointing. But I don't think you all of a sudden have the right to sit there and talk about like how you are owed something, or, well, we showed up and we weren't given what we want, so I'm not showing up anymore. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Other than it's just frustrating to see the amount of effort that it takes to have to just do something that you think for most fan bases would be pretty simple. Hey, we've got a really good team coming in. It's a Saturday night game. Show up and show out and yell. And people take you saying show up as like an insult. And it's like, if we're starting there, then, you bog down in like what people are wearing, and then you it's just a lot of just nonsense to me. So again, if you're somebody that can't go because you have a legitimate reason, fine. But if you're somebody that's not going because it's not the right color t-shirt, or the weather's wrong, like Paul said, or the kickoff time's not good enough, like, I'm just over it. I'm tired of hearing about it. They don't have that problem in a lot of other places. And if that's just the reality of where this place is, then, the unfortunate part of it is like all those hardcore fans, I commend them. I'm definitely not calling out the fan base, because I know somebody's already going to try and spin it that way. Like they spun Joe Vaughn's comments, like they spun Mac Rhodes' comments. I know that's probably coming, but it's just such a battle, man. And I'm tired of talking about it year after year after year, because it's not changing all that much. And I commend those who are trying to change it. But yeah, there's a lot of old fuddy-duddies who are just very stuck in the mud and very angry at everything and very spoiled in a lot of ways too. And, I'm just not going to spend much energy on those folks.
Yeah, I've done many conversations about the attendance, and I've learned that I'm beating my head against the wall, and I get that there's a lot of reasons. Bottom line is, go into your soul. By the way, Dave Arand is embarrassed by how his team played Saturday night. He knows they missed an opportunity. Go back and listen to the end of my one-on-one with him. Everyone knows that they absolutely blew a tire. Then Baylor is kind of, not always, but there was times when they would show up for a big men's game and they would lose to KU 10, 15 years ago. Now they win those games, a lot of them, or Texas or whoever. So it's over. So there's me, a lot of you that put everything you had into that game as far as what you wore, and if you spent money, and I get it, and you're going to go, screw them, they lost. I don't blame you for that. But that's not how you act if you're a true blue blood, or you want to be, and I'm not saying Baylor is, type of rabid fan base. You go again. And if they get beat 50-7 by TCU, you go again next year.
Yeah, and you don't have to have a sellout streak. I mean, you don't, but I think the fight for support is just. Am I wrong? Does it just feel like it's such a struggle sometimes? Yeah. And it's not like it's like, and we're talking about a team that's bowl eligible and was in the hunt for a Big 12 title with a top 25 opponent coming in and a 3-game win streak. And you're having to like convince people to show up. And the only way you can convince them
coming off a Big 12 championship and Sugar Bowl.
Yes, coming off of the most successful season in history. And it's like one thing goes wrong and it's like, Dave Aranda's not the guy. I'm not showing up anymore. And it's just like, man, I don't know. Like, I'm just not even going to try to fight that fight, because that to me is just, I don't even know how to describe it. And I do think like, if that's the way you want to be, like I said, if you're massively supportive, don't hit me with the post about how much you donate. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the fickle folks out there that think that they only should show up if the team's unbeaten and wearing what they want to every Saturday, which is the minority. But it was such a struggle last week, and now they lose a game, and granted, they lose badly. And you're right. Like, if you have a game like that, you have to win that game, or you at least have to put on a showing to bring people back. Like, you have to do your job as well. So this is not all on the fans. This is also on the terrible performance. And that's why Dave Aranda, I think, probably feels bad, is because he knows they're going to have to work really hard to drum up an audience like that again. And the fact that a week later, even though you lost, and yes, you lost embarrassingly, is instead of people going like, well, at least TCU's coming to town, you get fired back up, big noon kickoffs coming to town, which is surprising, but hey, here they are. And there's a ton of stuff to play for despite that loss. And instead of it going like, man, we're really lucky that we're getting all this and this other opportunity, even though we quite frankly don't really deserve it after last week. And it's like, man, the crowd's going to suck. Nobody's going to be there. There's going to be, and it's just like, that's just depressing to me. That's depressing to me.
And I see a lot that maybe TCU will have a big crowd. They have their own problems when they're at Amon Carter, but they are going to travel well. But
they're unbeaten in the playoff hunt. Of course they're going to travel well. Yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah,
by the way, the fan base did their job last week.
They did.
They got a promotion going. They almost built it from scratch. The athletic department finally kind of said, "Hey, we need to kind of let this thing go too." And that was an incredible setting and atmosphere, and poop, but it was gone.
You can't just take it away, because then what you're saying is not even to the university, they've heard it all, but to the team that really needs to see it. Hey, you guys, our love is very conditional.
Yes,
it
exactly.
Is very conditional.
That's the proper way to put it. Yeah,
and so as opposed to we're with you, ride or die. We're thick and thin. We are only with you thick. We are not with you thin.
Exactly.
We earned if we come, we earn a win. And I get, Garrett, do you have the Snacks Lorando Johnson tweet? All right, this is interesting here. So Snacks, a good player, young player. Nobody got our back but us. That's a young man who plays for Baylor. And I'm sure that, they got beat up a lot for what happened on Saturday night, and probably deservedly so. You don't want to get personal, but I get it. The responses to that over and over and over again was, no, I'm going to be there next Saturday. I'll be there Saturday. So we'll see on Saturday, 11 o'clock, against the number 4 ranked unbeaten Frogs at McLean Stadium.
I know we got to go, but
yes.
This is not a shot at you if you showed up in support of the team and all that, but it's just the fickle nature of like you're owed something because you bought a ticket. Yeah, I mean, we'd all like to see the team that we bought a ticket to go see win every game that we show up for and have everything be perfect, but that's just not the way that it is, and I just think that it's a bit alarming that the I guess response is, we're not going to show up next week when unbeaten TCU, our arch rival who kicks our ass every year, rolls into town. That's the exact opposite response. That's not sending a message to Mac Rhodes when the axe you have to grind, or anybody else that you are mad at because they don't do things the way that it's always done beforehand for the last 50 years. That's sending a message, like Paul said, and not a good one to the team. And it also just doesn't look very good. So if anything, you're not sending a message that you think you are. You're actually doing more harm than good. And I don't think enough people realize that, or maybe they're too stubborn to realize that, but that's the few and far between, and those are the folks that we're talking about.
But thank you to all of you who showed up and were loud and you were ready and you were in black or whatever you were wearing, because that place was lit up and ready to go, and then the match was lit, and then all of a sudden it had a big wet blanket put on it, and that's unfortunate. Dave Aranda knows it, Mac Rhodes knows it, all of them know it, and we'll see what happens Saturday, 11 o'clock, against a hell of a team out of Fort Worth.